Before you can truly understand what's going on in someone else's mind, you first need to face the noise inside your own. This isn't just a feel-good idea, it's reality. Your thoughts, your emotional triggers, your desire to be right, to be accepted, to feel safe. They don't just influence how you feel, they shape how you perceive everything. When your inner world is unsettled, you're not really seeing others clearly. You're seeing them through the lens of your own emotions. That's not clarity, that's projection. The real ability to understand people doesn't begin with clever questions or psychological tricks. It begins with stillness, the kind of stillness the Stoics practiced, where ego steps back and attention becomes sharp. When your mind is calm, like still water, it becomes a mirror. And in that reflection, the truth of others begins to appear, gently, without force. You start to notice not just what people say, but what they mean. Not just how they act, but what they're carrying. But here's the challenge. The world doesn't encourage this kind of depth. It teaches us to speak louder, move faster, and win. That noise, it drowns out the subtle, the real. If you've ever felt like people are wearing masks, like something's missing beneath the surface, and you just can't quite name it, this message is for you. Because understanding people isn't about pushing harder, it's about listening deeper. We're going to explore what Stoic clarity really means, how to quiet your mental chatter, and why stillness isn't weakness. It's one of the most powerful tools you'll ever develop. If this message resonates with you, if it helps shift something in how you see yourself or others, I invite you to support this work in the simplest way. Hit that subscribe button. That's it. It helps more than you know, and it allows us to keep exploring topics that genuinely matter. So let's get into it. Because understanding others doesn't begin with them, it begins with you. And the foundation? It's stillness. But not the numb, checked-out kind. This is a living stillness, a presence that observes without rushing to judge, fix, or respond. It's not about zoning out, it's about tuning in. Your senses sharpen, your awareness expands, your ego steps aside. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." This kind of stillness is the beginning of that awakening. Not through overthinking, but through the discipline of restraint, the strength to simply be present. Have you ever truly sat with someone, not just listening to the words, but feeling the pauses between them, noticing the rhythm of their voice, the shift in their breathing when something vulnerable comes up? Those moments, the ones that matter, are rarely loud. They live in hesitation, in a flicker of discomfort, in a subtle change of posture, in a quiet shift in tone. Most people miss those signals, not because they're invisible, but because their minds are too noisy to notice. We live in a world that celebrates speed, but understanding, the kind that connects us deeply, lives in stillness. The instant analysis, it's tempting, but wisdom doesn't rush. Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Yet how many times do we barrel through conversations without ever pausing to see what's beneath the surface? True stillness, real stillness, creates a space between what someone says and how you react. In that brief pause, something shifts. You begin to see the person before you, not as a character in your own story, but as someone living and unfolding in their own rhythm. It's easy to assume we need more information to truly understand someone. More words, more explanation. But often, it's the quiet moments, the restraint, that reveal the most. Plato believed silence gives consent. But it does something else too. It brings clarity. In silence, truth doesn't get forced. It emerges. People sense you're not in a hurry to judge. You're simply there. And in that presence, they drop the mask, sometimes without even realizing it. Here's the irony. The more you practice stillness, the more you notice what's always been there. Micro-expressions, nervous habits, the stories hidden beneath the surface. You start sensing when words don't match actions, not through analysis, but through awareness. That's because your mind isn't crowded with your own projections. You're not overlaying fears or fantasies. You're just seeing. As Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. That truth applies just as much to reading others. With stillness as your anchor, you begin to catch your own impulses. Quick judgments, the need to be right, subtle interruptions, steering the conversation back to yourself. Once you notice these patterns, their power starts fading. You stop speaking just to fill silence. You stop listening just to respond. Instead, you show up differently, and people feel it. There's a quiet respect in that kind of attention, a reverence for the other person and for what silence can hold. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space, room for something deeper, something unfiltered, unperformed. When someone feels truly seen, without commentary or correction, they reveal themselves. Not to impress you, but because they finally feel safe enough to be real. That's what stillness offers. Not emptiness, but clarity. Not passivity, but presence. In a world addicted to distraction, that kind of attention is rare and powerful. It's the beginning of understanding someone, not just through their words, but through what they reveal when you've quieted enough to hear it. Reading people begins where your story ends. You can't truly understand someone if your mind is still scripting responses, rehearsing comebacks, clutching assumptions, waiting for a turn in the spotlight. That constant inner narration distorts everything. To read someone clearly, you first have to still yourself. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to let go of the story you keep telling yourself and just observe. But what does that really mean? What are you observing exactly? Everything. And not in some abstract, mystical way. I'm talking about the physical signals, the subtle, often overlooked details that are always present. It's more than just the words someone speaks. It's the space between those words. The pause before they answer a tough question. The way their tone softens when something personal comes up. The flicker in their expression when something hits a nerve. These signs aren't hidden. They're just quiet. And if your mind is too noisy, you'll miss them. Most of us have been trained to focus on what people say. But the truth is, words can be misleading. People often speak from fear, habit, or a desire to please, to protect themselves or to avoid conflict. But the body, it tells the truth. It doesn't lie. It can't keep up a performance forever. There's always a tell. Sometimes it's in the tension around the eyes, a glance toward the floor, hands that fidget when they should be still. And when what someone says doesn't match how they say it, trust the body. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." That doesn't just apply to habits. It applies to how we reveal ourselves over time. Repeated discomfort in the same places. A pattern of pulling away when emotions rise. These aren't random. They're signals. And the more you pay attention, the clearer they become. This isn't about dissecting people like puzzles. It's about simply being present long enough to notice what remains constant when the mask begins to slip. There's real power in just observing without reacting. When you stop trying to control the moment, when you resist the urge to fill silence or shape someone's response, your awareness deepens. You begin to feel when something's off, not because you analyzed it, but because you were fully present. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or avoid. And often, someone's shadow isn't revealed in what they say, but in what they skip over. The emotions they dismiss, the discomfort they laugh off. You've likely felt this before. Someone says they're fine, but something in your gut tells you otherwise. That's not fantasy. That's perception. But that kind of clarity only shows up when you stop projecting your own fears, your need to fix, judge, or rescue. Only then do you really see. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." That wisdom doesn't just help you understand yourself, it deepens your understanding of others too. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go of the story you're telling yourself and just observe. Observe what? Everything. But not in some vague, mystical way. I'm talking about the real, tangible signs, things that are always right in front of you, but often overlooked. It's the way someone pauses before they answer, the shift in their breathing when something stirs them, the way their voice trembles just slightly when they try to seem unaffected. These are the things most people miss because they're too busy reacting, too caught up in what they think is happening instead of what actually is. But when you slow down, when you watch without needing to fix, respond, or label, you start to notice the truth, because the truth is rarely in the words. Words are rehearsed, they're filtered. But the body doesn't lie. It flinches when it's afraid. It pulls back when it feels shame. It tightens when it's holding something in. People can dress up their language, but their energy will always tell the real story. And if you pay attention long enough, you'll begin to feel what they're not saying. The sadness behind the smile, the anger behind the calm, the fear behind the bravado. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll start to recognize the patterns, the way someone always changes the subject when things get too real, the way their tone softens when they feel seen, the way their entire body relaxes when they realize you're not here to judge them. This is the kind of observation that changes things, not because you say something, but because your presence shifts everything. You stop trying to decode people and start letting them reveal themselves. You stop assuming and start witnessing. And in that space, where nothing is forced, you begin to understand more than words could ever tell you. The quieter you are within yourself, the more clearly you begin to notice subtle signals. It's not about dissecting every gesture or glance. It's about noticing patterns that emerge over time. That's where the real story lives. Not in one moment, but in repetition, especially when emotions run high. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But if you're not paying attention to your own patterns first, your view of others will always be colored by bias, assumptions, or projections. So it starts with you. You watch your own reactions. You notice your tension, your defenses, not to judge them, but to understand them. And with that understanding comes clarity. You begin to recognize your own patterns, and then slowly they become familiar in the people around you too. A quiet moment, an awkward smile. They don't confuse you anymore, because you've seen them in yourself. This kind of awareness doesn't just make you more observant, it makes you more compassionate. When you notice someone's mask, you don't try to rip it away. You understand why it's there, because you've worn one too. And that calm, steady presence, that's what draws people in. Not pressure, not questions, just your ability to really see them, without judgment. Reading others begins with reading yourself. The body is always speaking. Your job is to learn the language, not to control it, but to connect. Because behind every shift in posture, every pause, every change in energy, there's a story waiting to be understood. Self-awareness sharpens your awareness of others. It always starts with you. The more honest you are about your own emotions, reactions, and habits, the easier it becomes to notice those things in the people around you. But if you've never stopped to observe how your body responds to anxiety, or how your voice changes when you're hiding something, then your understanding of others will be fragile. You'll be guessing. And when it comes to human behavior, Guessing can lead you astray. You might mistake silence for disinterest, confidence for arrogance. What you perceive in others is always filtered through what you haven't yet seen in yourself. When you're with someone, truly with them, try slowing down. Let go of the urge to guide the conversation or rush to fill the quiet. Instead, notice what's happening in the spaces between words. There's something powerful there, a kind of energy in the room that shifts, even if nothing is said aloud. How someone subtly adjusts their posture when a subject touches something deeper. The way the air seems to tighten around something unspoken. You don't have to name it, just notice it. Because understanding doesn't start with answers. It starts with awareness. And no, this isn't about decoding people or using clever tricks to read their minds. It's simpler than that and more challenging. It's about presence. Real, quiet, non-performative presence. Most of the time, we're not really present. We're thinking of what to say next, scrolling through thoughts like a feed. But presence, real presence, is something else. It doesn't push or perform. It just listens. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But for that to happen, both people need to actually show up, fully. People don't open up because you say the perfect thing. They open up when they feel safe. And safety? It often lives in silence more than speech. In the kind of attention that doesn't press, doesn't pry, just stays. No rushing, no fixing, no trying to impress. Just being there. And when someone does begin to open, it's not because of something clever you said. It's because, for once, you weren't trying to be clever at all. So pause for a moment. When was the last time someone looked at you with no agenda, no expectation, just presence? Have you ever noticed how powerful it is when someone just listens? Not waiting to prove a point or top your story, just there with you. There's something grounding about that. You trusted them, didn't you? Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't need to. They weren't trying to impress you. They were simply present. And that's when you opened up. Not because they asked you to, but because their quiet made space for you. That's the paradox. The less you try to figure people out, the more clearly you begin to see them. Not by working harder, but by getting out of the way. By letting go of the need to interpret, to reach, to assume. And then the truth has room to emerge. It never yells. It whispers. Through a shift in body language, a pause in rhythm, a topic carefully avoided. You don't notice those things when you're rushing. You notice them when you're still. What reveals the most isn't usually loud or dramatic. It's found in repetition, in the small patterns that appear when someone thinks no one's paying attention. How they respond to discomfort. Whether they avoid emotion. Whether their energy changes when a question touches something tender. These aren't just glitches. They're signals. Socrates once said wisdom begins in wonder. And when you stop needing to name and categorize everything, when you sit in that wonder, you start to see people not as you want them to be, but as they truly are. Anyone can appear composed when things are going well. Anyone can be kind when it's easy. Anyone can be honest when the truth costs nothing. But what happens under pressure? What shows up when things get real? If someone breaks down when they feel exposed, if they lie when they're scared, deflect when things get emotional, or shrink when they're truly seen, that's not random. That's a rhythm. Patterns speak louder than moments. And when the mind is stretched, when someone's uncomfortable, that's when their deeper truths emerge. Not in the words they've rehearsed, but in the actions they repeat. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." We all have scripts, Most of them play out quietly, on repeat, especially when we think no one's watching. How people respond to discomfort. The way someone changes the subject, how they avoid certain topics, the silence that falls when emotions come up. These aren't random. They're forms of communication. It's not about labeling or analyzing. It's not about fixing or judging. It's about noticing. Just notice. Let patterns unfold naturally. Let time do its work. One moment might not tell you much. 2 might still leave you unsure. But 3, 4, 5, a rhythm starts to form. That's when things begin to make sense, not all at once, but piece by piece. Socrates said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." And that includes knowing people. If you try to define someone too quickly, if you make up your mind based on one moment, you might miss who they really are. Because most of what makes us who we are isn't visible in a single conversation. Understanding someone takes time. And that's okay. You might wonder, what if I still get it wrong? You probably will sometimes. We all do. We each bring our own past, our own stories, our own biases into every interaction. But that's not a failure. It's human. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Curiosity over certainty. Openness over assumptions. Let people show you who they are. Not through what they say once, but through what they repeat without even realizing it. Because patterns don't lie. They don't always shout, but they speak. Quietly, honestly. And if you're willing to be patient, to stop rushing to understand or define, those patterns will start to reveal themselves. You don't need to force it. You don't need to figure it all out right away. Clarity doesn't come from certainty. It comes from stillness, from watching, listening, and letting the truth unfold on its own time. How people handle discomfort tells you a lot. Notice what they steer away from, how they shift the conversation when feelings enter the room. It's not random. It's a kind of language. They may not say it outright, but they're still telling you something. Your role isn't to diagnose it, not to jump to conclusions. It's simply to notice, to stay present, not from a place of control or critique, but from quiet observation. Let things unfold. Let time do some of the work. One moment might mean anything. 2 might still be unclear. But over time, a rhythm begins to form. That's when real understanding starts. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." That includes people. If you try to define someone too quickly, you'll probably miss the bigger picture. Because most of who we are doesn't show up in a single moment. It shows up in patterns, over weeks, over months. So give it time. Let that be enough. And if you're wondering, what if I misread? What if I get it wrong? You might. We all do. That's human. We see through the lens of our own stories, our past, our fears, our hopes. But the goal isn't perfection. It's presence. It's staying open, curious, letting people show you who they are, not by what they say once, but by what they show you, again and again, often without realizing it. Because patterns don't lie. They're not always loud, but they are consistent. And if you stop pushing, stop needing instant clarity, those patterns begin to surface naturally. They always do. You just have to give them space. Let them speak in their own time. And when they do, believe what you see. Not as a verdict, but as a quiet truth that's been unfolding all along. Clarity isn't about rushing to define. It's about letting things reveal themselves, slowly, honestly, in their own way, the mirror. And in that mirror, people begin to see themselves. Not the version they've practiced for the world, but the one that quietly emerges in unguarded, honest moments. That's where real connection begins, not through having all the answers, but by holding space for what's ready to be seen. In the end, It's often the quietest presence that hears the clearest truths. You don't have to chase understanding. You just have to create enough stillness for it to arrive. If this touched something in you, there's another video waiting now, one that invites you even deeper. Thank you for being here and for walking this path with Stoic Journal. The journey doesn't continue through noise, but through awareness. Stay grounded, stay curious, and I'll see you again soon.